Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Talk More Talk, a Solo Beatles video cast where we talk about all things from the solo years. And of course, occasionally the Beatles do come up. We are so excited to be with you all tonight. I think this is going to be a great, great show. They're all great, of course, but this one is just a little bit more special. So thank you for
How could it be
joining us.
otherwise? With
How could it be otherwise? Exactly. And as you can see, we are joined by two very special guests tonight. So we've got a lot to get to. So let's go into it. Before we get to everything, let me introduce myself, my co-host, and our special guests and why they're here. My name is Kit O'Toole. I'm the author of Songs We Were Singing, Guided Tours to the Beatles' Lesser Known Tracks, Michael Jackson FAQ, All That's Left to Know About the King of Pop, and the act you've known for all these years, Fandom in the Beatles, which I co-edited with one of our guests tonight. Yes, indeed. I think you can guess which one. You're right. Everybody's pointing different. Oh, thank you, Ken. Everybody's pointing different directions, so you'll figure it out. So now let me first introduce my co-host that I am lucky enough to host the show with every other Monday. He is the co-host of the very popular Paul McCartney centric video cast and podcast, Two Legs. Say hello to Tom Hunyadi. Hi, Tom. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm wonderful, Kit, and we've got a wonderful bunch of people joining us here today. I can't wait to talk about.
Yes,
Looking
indeed.
forward to it.
Absolutely.
It's going to be wonderful tonight.
Yes, yes, I think so. Oh, very, and that's a very appropriate. That is a very appropriate pun.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
Yeah, that's right. And don't forget to tip your waitress.
Yeah.
And next, he is the host of the very popular YouTube channel, Mean Mr. Mayo, where he talks about all things collecting, mainly Beatles centric and solo centric, but not entirely. He talks about other groups as well. He has a show on there as well called Fab Gab, and many other delights on his channel. So say hello to Joe Mayo. Hello, Joe.
Hare Krishna, everyone. Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you.
Absolutely. And also we have kind of a legend in the Beatles world and a very, very busy man. He is the co-host of the also very popular podcast, Things We Said Today, the long-running syndicated show Every Little Thing, where he plays just that. Every little thing from the Beatles and solo years, often organized around really clever topics. And as if that weren't enough, in addition to this show, he also has Ken Michaels Radio, which is on YouTube, where he interviews everybody from authors to musicians to YouTube stars, you name it. So say hello to you, the man that everybody knows and loves, Ken Michaels. Hello, Ken.
Thank you, Kit. You're going to write all the introductions for me from now on, and Gopala Krishna.
That's right. Exactly.
Whatever that means.
There you go. I don't know either, but right on. Yeah. So, and as you can tell, we have two very special guests, and of course, they are very familiar faces to our show. We are just thrilled to have them back on. The reason they're on is because of this book right here, which just came out recently, All Things Must Pass Away, Harrison, Clapton, and Other Assorted Love Songs. And it's a really fantastic book. We can't wait to get into it.
Banger.
It's a banger, and yes, indeed. And these are the two authors, and we are just so excited to have them on. First, Jason Kruppa. He was previously with us, if you recall, talking about Phil Spector and his production style. We are excited to have him back. He is also the host of Producing the Beatles, which, if you haven't heard it, check it out. It is just a fascinating podcast that breaks down all of the production techniques that the Beatles use, their instrumentation. Even for somebody like me, who's a layperson, is not technical, he explains it so well. You really have to check it out. So, Jason, welcome back to Talk More Talk.
Thank you. You forgot my ninja training, but otherwise everything is nailed it.
They're
Very
okay.
Next time, though.
All right, there you go. And we want to welcome back our friend. He can't be on here as much as he'd like, but we're so glad to have him back. He is the author of so many books that I can't name them all, or we wouldn't have time
It'll
to
fill up
have
the
a
hour.
show tonight.
I don't have as many hands to hold them all up, you know.
Yeah, exactly. So, but you know him from so many books, including John Lennon 1980, The Last Days in the Life, the 2-volume biography of George Martin, Maximum Volume and Sound Pictures, the Beatles Encyclopedia, and
Solid State.
For all these
Solid
years,
State.
Fandom and the Beatles, and many, many more. Ken Womack. Ken, good to see you, my friend.
Oh, thanks, Kitten. It's great to be back with my TMT colleagues.
Oh, well, we're thrilled to have you back. So, as we said, we are here to talk about the new book. We also want questions from all of you who are tuning in tonight. So we are going to be monitoring those comments as well and get to as many questions as we can. They will take any questions about the book, about Eric Clapton and George Harrison's, their friendship, their creative partnership, and their time working on All Things Must Pass, Eric Clapton's time with Derek and the Dominoes, Blind Faith, Yardbirds. I know I'm missing a bunch of others because he was in a lot of bands, and so on and so forth. So, but before we get to that, as always, Ken Michaels is our man with the news. So, Ken, take it away.
Okay, thank you for the take. Yes. We're going to keep the news as brief as possible because I know we just want to focus on talking with Jason and Ken. But today, Ringo posted a video message basically saying that this coming Thursday, he'll have a special message that he will let us know about at 4 p.m. Pacific time or 7 p.m. Eastern time on something called Talk Shop Live. And I posted the link for that on my Facebook page and spread it on other pages too. So basically, he made an announcement that he's about to make another announcement for this Thursday.
The 50th anniversary release for Blind Man film, I hope.
I don't think that's it. I'm guessing it's for his next EP.
EP, absolutely.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Which probably will come out September or October, I guess. Also, good news, the McCartney 3 Imagine album is the first remix album to hit #1 on Billboard's US album top sales chart in 10 years. It's #1 in album sales, it's the #1 rock album, and #1 vinyl album. And on Billboard's top 200 albums charts, it debuts at number 19. All right. Paul McCartney reposted a photo of him getting vaccinated from a while back with the message, "Be cool, get vaxxed." No doubt because of COVID cases rising and the Delta variant spreading. This is to encourage those that still haven't done so yet. Paul also sent out a video message wishing the great Tony Bennett a happy 95th birthday. Paul is quoted as saying, "I get a kick out of Tony Bennett turning 95 today because I love him and his music, and I love his son, Danny. Happy birthday, Tony." The legendary singer turned 95 on Tuesday this week. Together, they recorded the duet, "The Very Thought of You." Paul McCartney and Rick Rubin are both interviewed in Rolling Stone discussing the McCartney 3-2-1 series, the art of creation and songwriting, the upcoming Get Back film, and more. Above all, you get to see the admiration that McCartney and Rubin have for each other. Rubin even admitted to collecting every Beatle bootleg and outtake. Oh. Another new book is out, and this one is called "Listen to What the Man Sang: The Casual Fan's Guide to Paul McCartney." It's by David Stebersky. Amazon says the book, quote, "serves as a guided biographical playlist that combines the man and his music and puts his creative output in a human context. It's a career-spanning story that's told fittingly through the lens of the man's best work. All the while, it reflects on the experience of being a McCartney fan and invites the uninitiated to discover their own favorites. Again, the book is now available. And finally, we're sad to report that the Fest for Beatle fans is being postponed again. And it will return, hopefully, next year, April 1st through the 3rd at the Hyatt Regency on the Hudson, due to, of course, the spread of COVID.
Which isn't
Maybe
really
as an April Fool's joke.
I was just going to say it wasn't the perfect date.
No, maybe they could say that it was canceled again, and then say April Fool's on.
But
yeah,
it's sad, but I really think Mark made the right move.
yeah,
Oh yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, better be safe than sorry.
Okay, that's it. Believe it or not,
All right.
kept it short and sweet.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, as always. All right. Well, as I said, we have a lot to get to. So all of you watching, start sending in your questions. We will get to as many as we can. By the way, Jason, viewer Susan Gagney said she's a big fan of your podcast and says you do such a great job on it. So
Thank you very much.
yeah. All right. Okay. So let's kick it off by saying, first of all, I'm sure I speak for everyone here when I say really enjoyed this. It's a very thought-provoking book. I mean, talking about comparing and contrasting their backgrounds, how they work. It's just a fascinating study. And one thing that I always, whenever I've interviewed an author, I kick it off by saying is sort of getting down to why you wrote the book. Is we've of course, we in the fandom, we know that they've been we're friends for many years. We know they collaborated on a number of songs and all. What did you want to accomplish? Why did you want to focus on their friendship and creative partnership? And that's to both of you.
Sure. And I have I think a unique way of kicking it over to Jason in just a second, but
Oh God.
These are great stories, right? And they need to be told in one place, so that readers, lovers of music can find themselves in the spaces where they're celebrating these records and getting a sense of how they unfolded before they became settled questions, right? When they were just the germs of ideas, much less ideas. So I don't want to speak for Jason on this, but I'm going to, we really like those kinds of books that really take you into a place where you can experience those stories as they unfold. And then there's the issue of writing under duress, Jason.
I mean, did something happen last year? Was it? I mean, yeah, there was a little. It actually helped me because I had something to focus on. So, in addition to the world sort of falling apart, having a book to say, okay, every day I get up and this is what I go to and I work on, was great. But I agree with what Ken says. It's, I wrote what I wanted to read. I wanted to discover things about these albums and about these people that when I was doing interviews and I was researching and I was sending Ken things that I found, he was sending things that he found. We were answering questions that we sort of had for ourselves. And I honestly, at the beginning, didn't realize how little research had been done on All Things Must Pass. I thought, it was somewhere, it was out there. And as I started looking into it, Ken actually said, he goes, this record's kind of a blank, isn't it? And so that was great to be able to fill in that blank with interviews and bust some myths and sort of reconsider our thinking about how these albums were made and what the conditions were and what the creative dynamic was.
Absolutely. Yeah, oh, go ahead, Joe.
I have some questions already, if I may, that sound
Sure.
interesting. Mark, sorry for getting your name wrong. Zutkov says, what was the thought process behind opening the book with 83 pages recapping George and Eric's history?
Ah, man, I knew people were going to ask questions I wanted to ask.
Well,
I
you know,
don't know if that
originally,
was, it doesn't seem sarcastic. It just was, I
no,
just know.
we weren't doing that. That was not in our original plan. But what happened is, actually, I pinned that prologue, and we got to talking about them and how very different they were, especially that image that George Harrison had of Eric being lonely. And while some readers may be familiar with those biographical years and the early stories of George and Eric, many are not, and they are germane, because these are two guys who come from very different places and backgrounds, and that does have a significant effect on how their story unfolds, and how their collaborations, when they occur, also unfold.
I agree, and I mean, obviously, I agree.
Or he would have vetoed it.
Yeah, I would have furious text back and forth. No, I mean, as the story unfolds, I hope people see that you know, especially in Clapton's case, this sort of dictates, you know, a lot of the decisions he's making. Whether it's he's leaving bands preemptively, as Ken has pointed out before, which that was something that I hadn't really clicked with me. Ken put all that together. He's leaving these bands, and he's got this sort of feeling of abandonment from childhood that he's repeating in his adult life, and this sort of self-sabotage that he just plays over and over and over again, and that also plays into his relationship with Patty. I mean, one of the we didn't put a fine point on this, but I think, you know, at the beginning, it is very much on George to see Eric and see this person that he wants to reach out to, and he keeps that friendship going, and he befriends him. And I think, you know, as time goes on, it becomes more of a give and take later on, but especially toward the beginning, you know, George is being very kind and generous toward him.
Yeah, and I think that's true, that, you know, what you were saying about his issues of abandonment, because that does make more sense than when, you know, you think about all the different bands that Eric Clapton was in, and that he wasn't in them long, and he would leave. And yeah, his background, when you described it, you thought, oh, that makes sense, you know, why he would do that.
And we also saw the Eric Patty relationship. I was loathing having to address this, because I just cannot stand the tabloid, you know, undercurrent of that. And fortunately, you know, we were able to view it from, again, that sort of childhood trauma that both he and Patty had, and discuss that in the framework of a trauma bond, which, you know, that's sort of the current psychological language for it. I know in, you know, the past there have been different terms, and in the future there'll be different terms for it. Currently, that's what it's being called. It's two people who have had, you know, these terribly traumatic childhoods, and they're, you know, of course there was a physical attraction between them, but on an emotional level, they're sort of addicted to chaos, and we see that once they finally get together, they, you know, they play that out. They do not have a happy romance.
Right.
Yeah, it's a great question, Mayo. I would be curious if he thought that, if the listener thought that was a good idea or not, because we really did kick that around a lot, and I would say, even though we didn't put too fine a point on this, since we take it the other direction to the end, at least, of George's life plus 1 year, it felt right to have that earlier section.
Absolutely. Tom, did you want to?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Something?
You know, I felt the same way while reading it. I was like, okay, why are we going through this backstories and everything? But as I'm reading it, I'm learning so much, and was really happy that you guys took that approach. And then obviously you guys answered that question that wasn't really going to be going that direction at first. But I mean, while you guys are researching Clapton, because, you know, yeah, the tragedy, I mean, yeah, did, you know, his youth was a little bit tragic. I mean, but you know, the friendship between him and George seemed like an unlikely one, because one, he pretty much lifts his nose up to pop, pop singers. I mean, pop music in general. And plus he's, lusting over his wife. It just didn't seem like an ideal friendship at first. I mean, what were you guys' thoughts as you guys were, researching and writing about Clapton?
That's so good. In a way, though, their friendship keeps overcoming these things.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I think George described Patty as his ex-wife-in-law or something like. How did he put it?
He described Clapton as his husband-in-law.
Husband-in-law. That's what it was. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
Well, I mean, yeah, I thought about this a lot because it does seem weird. I mean, I think there are a lot of different factors. One, there's the attitude toward possessiveness in relationships and the whole free love thing, which that's one layer of it. I think another layer that we can't really discount, and that none of us as regular non-rock stars can really understand, is that they were part of a very small, rarefied group. And as they got to know each other, and the sort of the pressures that keep people together in not necessarily a clique, but in those little sort of celebrity groups where you kind of have each other to rely on. And they bonded on music, they bonded on guitars. And that we talk about this, at not great length in the book, but we talk about the Delaney and Bonnie tour in December 1969, which was really important. George spends 2 weeks on tour with them, with Clapton, and I think that's really critical for them, because George discovers something that he's been missing in the Beatles, and he shares this with Clapton. Clapton's having a good time, and he, again, he can't decide where he wants to be. He's sort of, maybe I'll be with Delaney and Bonnie, maybe I'll do this, maybe I'll do that, but I think that's an important moment. So I think there are a lot of different factors at play here that go into forming and cementing this relationship. It's not any one factor.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like both of them were encouraging each other to, continue to grow as musicians and, and artists and whatnot. So I saw that as a building block to their relationship. One thing I also liked, reading about in early 1970, George is still optimistic that the Beatles are going to continue to record. I mean, how much stock do you guys put into that? Do you think, he really thought that they were going to do that, or was he just saving face for the whole McCartney, blowing up the Beatles thing?
I mean, I think on some level he talked about it so much.
Right.
We cite a number of interviews where he brings this up and mentions it. So some of it may, he's a director of Apple, so he has to put on a good face for the company. But we have that quote from Patty in the book where she says, I'm paraphrasing, I can't remember the exact quote, but she says something about how, George kind of didn't want them to break up. He was very sad about it because they'd been together all these years, and that was a very intense relationship, to experience all that with those other three people, to let go of that had to be a huge thing to address. You don't just kind of come out and accept that, it's over with.
Right.
I was kind of surprised to find in one of the interviews that George gave that he actually mentioned the whole idea of making another album, like that September 1969 meeting.
Yes.
And he actually said 3 from John, 3 from Paul, not the 4, but I mean the whole concept of that.
Yeah.
And he brought that up in an interview.
Yeah. So and that was not just the next month, it was several months later. So this is clearly on his mind. This is clearly in the air. He doesn't know exactly what's brewing with Paul. Paul has kind of cut himself off from the rest of the band. And so, that's a whole unknown, but I think George is speaking from where he thinks things are going to go.
Interesting. One other thing before I turn it over, there's a bunch of controversy surrounding the song "It Don't Come Easy." How much George actually did for the song for Ringo. I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on that?
And I think he did quite a bit, and he didn't want to take credit for it. It's just being a friend to Ringo.
The demo's pretty revealing.
Yeah, really.
Well, at the same time, Ringo has said publicly that George wrote a verse and a bridge, and he was
Yeah.
specific about what George wrote. So that's part of it, but it's not all of it.
Right.
And very often fans will respond because they feel that how could Ringo possibly write something this good? So there's no doubt about it. George has his fingerprints on the song, but most of the song is supposed to be Ringo's.
Yeah.
And I
But
think that,
George produced it, and big part
yeah,
with the guitar playing and everything. And as a
Yeah.
matter of fact, the intro of It Don't Come Easy is very much like what was played on Badge, that guitar break.
Yeah.
right.
So-
Right.
Leslie guitar. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very similar.
There's another aspect when you think about George during this period. Jason just mentioned he's a director of Apple. He is perhaps the most engaged member of Apple during this point and
Yes.
henceforward, right?
Mhm.
Because while to different extents they'd all been nurturing Apple acts, George is the one who kind of sticks with that program for a while, and certainly longer than the others.
Mm.
And that's that quote in early 70 where he's talking about having a house band for Apple artists. He's
Right.
envisioning
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
as something moving forward, where he's going to produce more people, and the label is going to be active and release more acts in the next year, however many years in the future.
Yeah.
That
And
was
really,
a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the whole Friar Park backstory too. So great
Yes.
job on that.
Thank you.
And then all the things that he took from the surroundings and put them into songs, like yesterday, today was tomorrow. And I really dug that. So kudos. I mean, I almost felt like the same way while we were reading the John Lennon book, 1980. I mean, it's part of the Friar Park is part of the story, just like the Dakota was part of Lennon's last year's. Ken.
I want to get more into the relationship of George and Eric and try and understand it better, because for most of the book, and it's great to understand, Eric's upbringing and his feeling of abandonment and all, but I get the feeling that basically their relationship was, it mainly concerned their love of music and guitars. I didn't really sense, in other words, I felt like there was an admiration between the two, but I didn't really feel a sense of, love. I hate to say it, between the two of them. Was it more of, a work relationship, or did they share anything more in common aside from Patty? Like spirituality or anything like that? Was it strictly the music that kept them together, and maybe George feeling sorry for Eric?
God, it's a tough one.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I'm going to give that to Ken.
It is, there's no doubt that it's a kind of mutual admiration society, and also just the sense that they're both rooting really hard for each other. These are guys, remember, we have to go back to 1970 again. They're not as sensitive and open with their feelings as you and I are. Particularly about the fact that we share the same name. But think about it for a moment, though. While George is very well known during this period to speak for hours about his spirituality,
Right.
and hold court in that way, they really are expressing a lot of their friendship through music, and remember, these are young guys, they're very young. They're not 30.
Yeah.
They're not any different from, I would imagine, a lot of friendships, which are about, particularly, not to get all masculinist, but often those friendships are based upon shared passions, right? I could be hunting, but it happens to be, or cars or what have you. But in this case, it happens to be that they're these folks who love the guitar, and they're gearheads, and that's where they find themselves. And they do want to see each other succeed. I mean, I love the story. We talked about Bangladesh, and I'm looking at Mayo's shirt there, but the story of George and Patty helping Eric to just even show up for that, to me, is very powerful. that would have, think about it, if with some of the things that had already been said about their shared relationship, the three of them, that would be easy to say, you know what, we're not going to go pick Eric up at Hurtwood Edge and get him to Madison Square Garden. We're gonna pass on that. But they don't do that, and there are a number of moments of sacrifice where they push the self out of the way like that, and they still show up for the gig, whatever the gig is. I find that really touching, and there are lots of stories like that with Harrison in general.
Guys, as far as talking about the relationship between the two of them, I wanted to say one thing that I've always thought was that it seemed a lot like George kind of needed Eric to help him get his toe in the water with things like we're talking about, like, say, the Prince's Trust concert in '87. Eric's there. 1991 Japan. Eric kind of like, gave him George the push, and it always seemed like, Eric had to take George by the hand a little bit at times. I thought it seemed like he felt comfortable having Eric around a lot of times, and of course, While My Guitar Gently Weeps, we know that. I don't know if I've sensed it so much the other way around, reciprocated, if you will, the other way around, on Eric's part. What do you think? You think George kind of leaned on Eric a lot?
I don't know about leaned on. I think by that point later on, they had a much different relationship that had been going on for many years, as opposed to what it was early on. And I think Eric saw maybe he could get George out on the road. He could get him to tour, and so I think that's a point where Eric is giving something back to George. Early on, from the outside, we can never really say for certain what the intricacies of a relationship are, whether it's friendship or marriage or whatever, from the outside. But just from what we can see from the outside evidence, it does. George was getting something from that relationship with Eric. He was whether it was just the musical aspect of it, or I think, like, again, the Delaney and Bonnie tour is very important. He's getting something more than just music. He's getting a camaraderie. He's getting a sense of community. And specifically with Eric, I think he enjoyed playing with Delaney and Bonnie, but I think, with Eric, that was where he was really, really connecting.
Think about it, as you just said, right? George isn't going to go if he isn't cajoled into those moments.
Right.
And Eric can do it where others can't, and we know they tried.
Right.
But Eric was ultimately successful.
Interesting. Do you think there was any competitiveness between the two of them?
Oh, absolutely. Clapton has come out and said that pretty bluntly, that they were competitive. And to his credit, Clapton in later years has said, he sort of owned up to the fact that he was basically wanting to be what George had. He basically wanted to be George Harrison. He wanted his beautiful wife, and he wanted his success, and he's in this great band.
You know what he didn't want? That Friar Park electric bell. I'm telling you, it's got to be big, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There are lights in the caves too. That all has to add up.
Wow.
But
I'm sorry, go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, did it work the other way? Because I don't really see George as being a very competitive person. He strove to get rid of ego,
Sure.
as we know.
Sure.
So, George, I kind of felt like after All Things Must Pass and the concert for Bangladesh, he got so much out of his system, and he had all this success, I think, beyond his wildest imaginations with All Things Must Pass, that he wasn't really he wasn't trying as hard to have success. He accomplished what he set himself out to do, but he still continued to put out really good music. It just didn't matter as much to him to stay on top,
Well, look, they're each providing each other with stages, but in different ways. Eric, in the cases that Jason just described, those are literal stages, right? And with different kinds of experiences. George is providing a stage. Who gets the first lead guitar line on All Things Must Pass?
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
You know,
Eric.
who
Eric.
providing that opportunity for him, even though he may have had ulterior motives on While My Guitar Gently Weeps. You know, that's not a stage that hurt Eric at all.
No,
And that's
right.
not to say that Eric is enormously successful in his own right, but it is a different level of experience than George Harrison's having. And one of the things that just makes George so interesting to me, and I think all of us, is the fact that he has this aspect of generosity
Right.
to him.
That, or did he just think that Clapton was better than him and more equipped to do better solos than George?
I don't know
Well,
if I'd go that far.
No, I mean,
Okay.
I mean, didn't George say something like to the effect that he brings Eric in and it gets the others to behave, just sort of like we have a stranger in the house, so keep it together, kids.
Same
George-
thing with Billy Preston.
Yeah.
Well, I had a couple of people seem to feel this is a technical question really about the music more, but two people seem to feel this way. They say on I Remember Jeep says both the book and the box set say that George played the Moog synthesizer live during the recording, but their ears seem to feel that the Moog parts came from the Electronic Sound album. Can you shed any light on this? But
Yeah,
I guess you already.
I mean that's as far as I know, that is true. I haven't lined them up in in a music editor, audio editor to test it, but somebody else has. I've seen posts about that, so that does seem to be the case. One thing, I mean, we have to own up to a couple of errors that we didn't have enough information for at the time in the book, and one of them is the date of recording of that track, which we had as being 1970, but it's actually 1969, which is in the the Uber box in the notes. It was from I guess provisionally a Plastic Ono band session, even though John and Yoko seem maybe to have been involved in the mixing, but not the recording. That's maybe a tangent we don't want to go off into as to what the Plastic Ono band could encompass. But yeah, so that was 1969. That's something he obviously remembered and had some sort of fondness for, and thought he would pull into this into the third disc of All Things Must Pass.
Okay, we have a Peter Hicks question. How did George and Eric's friendship really start? Who reached out to whom? And when did they get together between 1964 and when Eric was playing on Wonderwall?
Read the book.
At least you have to read the book somewhere.
It's in the book.
The book, yeah.
That's the answer. That's the answer.
It's in the book.
The answer's at the beginning of the book, not the
And
end.
it's at the end.
Oh yeah, very good.
I see what you did there.
There we go. Look at
It's
that.
at the beginning, right?
I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Well, to address that though, I mean, they did spend quite a bit of time together when they could, but remember, those are crazy years. They meet, they have a connection. They stay in as close a touch as you can during that period. But the Beatles are still barnstorming the world until 66. Eric is breaking up one band after another, as his wont.
Takes a lot of energy.
It does. My favorite one is Blind Faith, as we've talked about before, where he's actually breaking them up in his head before they play their first live note in performance. Talk about your preemptive breakups. But things do begin to settle down when they settle down and they both get their estates, right, in fairly close proximity one to another. Which continues on to Friar Park. They still live in a relative close proximity, and they have more time on their hands. Particularly after Cream stops doing their thing. When he breaks them up. So.
I wonder if he would have joined the Beatles when get Eric Clapton or something. I wonder if the Beatles would have stayed together. Maybe in that case, that would be maybe a success story.
That's an interesting question. There's also the issue of John Lennon's remark, right? In January 1969, get Eric.
Right.
And
Yeah.
of course, for all of Eric's trauma, which we've spoken about now at great length, I think there's no way Eric ever takes that gig, right? I mean, do you agree, Jason?
Yeah, that's not going to happen. I mean, I never thought about that until this moment, but maybe John, there's some recognition in John that Eric kind of craves that spot, that he's coveting what George has. That's just.
But he might not want that from John Lennon.
No.
Even though he agrees, obviously to perform with him in the fall.
Right.
He has his own misgivings about John.
Sure. Yeah. But I'm speaking from John's point of view. This is total speculation. I have no base. I'm just sort of wondering, like, maybe John was perceptive enough to realize that Eric sort of coveted what George had. Who knows?
I don't think Eric would ever have been happy to have had the level of success and the craziness that the Beatles had. He didn't want that kind of thing.
Maybe
and he would have had to break them up. I mean, he would have had to break up the Beatles. So
I'm sure he would have wanted the stability, though, of being in a group for as long as George was in a group. I wonder.
Only if they play the pure blues, though.
There you go. Yeah. There you go. There you go.
Yeah, he was a music snob.
Right.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Just jumping ahead in the book, one of my favorite parts was when you sort of compare and contrast the making of All Things Must Pass and Layla. I that was absolutely fascinating, and one of the things that I found the most fascinating was not only just the nuts and bolts making of the albums, but sort of comparing that these were two artists that were creating what became their artistic statements and kind of their debut was of them as independent, sort of important artists. And they experienced, I mean, they knew what they wanted to do, but they seemed to encounter quite a bit of confidence issues. George certainly did, and I think Eric Clapton certainly did in his own way. Did that surprise you as you were researching the two of them creating these albums? Was that a surprise to you that they were at times not confident taking this big step?
I mean, absolutely. I sort of going into this had the impression that George was just raring to go and like, okay, here I go. I'm going to make my album, right? I got 30 songs. I just need to get them out, right? And there was some element of that. But there's also, there's the quote where he talks about, being uncertain if anybody's going to like these songs, because he had sort of been conditioned all this time in the Beatles where they're not necessarily rejecting songs, although in some cases they certainly do. But he talks about how they wouldn't get a song very quickly. Like they wouldn't take the time to sort of, feel it out and say, okay, what is this song about? And, let's get a vibe for it. And that's John and Paul centric behavior in that band. They're really sort of driving things. So if they're not going to engage in something, it's not going to go anywhere. And George sensed that, and All Things Must Pass is a perfect example. They try the song out, they rehearse it, nobody gets it. They barely get through any full version, and he just abandons it because he realizes they're not going to get anywhere with it. The Beatles are not going to give this the energy it needs, and so he's doing this with these other musicians and all for the All Things Must Pass sessions, and he's realizing that they're responding positively. And Alan White, even, it's funny, the contrast between the way the Beatles responded to All Things Must Pass and Alan White saying, when I walked him through every session, anybody I interviewed, I walked through every session chronologically and got their memories. And he said, I brought up All Things Must Pass, and he said, with a song that good, it was just easy to play. So, he got sympathetic musicians, and they responded well to these songs, which is exactly what he needed. But it was, I mean, I think it's understandable that he would go into this with a certain amount of expectation of like, well, you know, people have not really been receptive to my songs all these years, so why would they be receptive now?
Right.
Yeah, and those three judges were Lennon, McCartney, and Martin.
Yeah.
You know, who were the gatekeepers. And of course, on the flip side, you've got Eric, who, by his own admission, his whole life was a crisis of confidence.
Right.
You know, he would need folks to provide him with that kind of external, I guess, gratification to say, it's all right. You've done okay here. You know, he really craved and needed that. And that's where they are very similar, at least at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
And it seemed like Duane Allman was a real turning point for him in making Layla. You know, that was really a creative force for him, and you know, where he really felt like we've got something here.
Absolutely. Yeah. The Sky Dog. And, but you know, what's interesting, you know, we spoke with Alan Parsons, who said, if anybody had a guitar in the All Things Must Pass session,
Right.
they could play, you know, just plug in. Right. It's interesting that there is, for a moment at least, although it's a much shorter moment, the making of Layla, there is a kind of ragtag atmosphere to how those songs were concocted. You know, several weren't ready when they showed up in Miami at all. So there was a lot of creative work right there on the ground just to have an album, much less a double album. That's another thing that's fascinating, right? We're talking about 5 records worth of material.
Yep.
Yeah. And you know, George's process is very deliberate. He records all the, you know, the backing tracks with Spector, who has a very specific way of working. And then he works on overdubs, and then he does the orchestral overdubs, which he is directing. Spector's not involved in that. He's telling John Barham what he wants him to write, and then Barham works out the voicings, the orchestral voicings. And then they go into mastering, and then, you know, that takes 5 months. And then Layla's finished, you know, in a matter of weeks. So they didn't have a lot of material when they walked into those sessions. So it's very seat of your pants versus, you know, George for the setting things up and going through methodically.
Interesting.
Absolutely.
Tom? Yeah, I want to ask about the list on page 119 here. You got
well, that's obviously Jason's fault.
Yeah. No, but it's you guys did a good job of putting in here with the people and when they were available to record on All Things Must Pass. I mean, was this carnal knowledge? I mean, was this stuff you guys had to dig for to find out when these people were available, these artists were available to perform with George on that album?
It sort of came through the research as I was looking up, you know, the first thing I did is I made a timeline of the entire year. And then as we went, we sort of filled in, you know, dates and what we could find. And then more things would come, more things would appear. And then I started realizing, like, wait a minute, this can't be right. This person wasn't even in town wasn't even in the country at this point. So, you know, again, it doesn't give us a comprehensive list of who played on what, but it's a good rule of thumb, you know, and, you know, and there may still be information that comes up that changes that or adds to that. You know, we don't know. Research is for something like this is just always ongoing. So, but that list really did kind of help keep things in order.
Right. And I would take it that Bobby Woodlock would be in the Derek and the Dominoes bullet point of that.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right.
However, he was there. He and Eric were there from the beginning.
Right.
So I don't know. You know, I want to emphasize that they were because he came over before Jim Gordon and Carl Radle to you know, to work with Eric and start forming that band, and they discussed who was going to be in that band, and their pick for drummer was actually Jim Keltner, which I don't know if this is a separate story that we want to get into and talk about this, how all that sort of develops, but that was another thing I discovered is that how Derek and the Lamos came together and how Jim Gordon sort of became the drummer for that band. That's not a news story necessarily, but the order in which that happened and the proximity to that first gig they had on June 14th.
And there is a maneuvering, right? There's a politics to it that's interesting because it has very significant ramifications for Derek and the Dominoes. And what I think most would argue is their single masterwork of a song.
Right.
Because Keltner, as far as I understand, did not date Rita Coolidge.
No.
How about Beatle Ed's question? Did Phil Collins play on the All Things Must Pass album, and what about the joke played on him?
Yes.
He did indeed. We tell the story of the joke in the book, and I don't think he's on Art of Dying. I think he's on Wah Wah, the first day where Spector is packing the studio with musicians, and it's the only song on the album that has congas on it. Neither the bootleg outtake or take 1 that you can hear on the box set, take 9, which has been bootlegged, or the master take has congas on it. But it is on Wah Wah. So to me, it makes sense that he plays on that date.
Well, I was on Wah Wah also. I don't know if you knew. I was like 8 years old. Because that's the kind of song.
I traveled back in time and was on it too. So don't tell me about it.
Yeah.
That joke they played on him was brilliant, though.
Yeah.
That was absolutely brilliant.
Get the book.
Yep, that's right. Get the book and you'll read all about it.
we actually had part of an unpublished interview with Phil Collins. Not really anything new, just a little different angle on it from a music journalist who I believe George set up in order to play that joke on Phil Collins. He used him as sort of the contact man. And so that journalist sent me the interview and we went back and forth. That was just a little extra detail.
Right, so this was elaborate.
Oh yes, no, I think he planned this out.
My goodness.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's the sense of humor.
Yes.
George's sense of humor right there.
Absolutely. Ken, how about you?
Yeah, I just want to clarify because, for all the people over the years who, while they love All Things Must Pass, they kind of soured on Phil Spector and his wall of sound production and everything. When you discuss what you have in your book, and you just mentioned this, Jason, how involved George was in the overall production and in everything and in the overdubbing. And yet there are moments in this book where I think it's Gary Brooker says that Phil Spector was in control. How much do you attribute to George or to Phil for the overall sound? Did one really dominate the other?
Klaus told me it was more of a partnership, a collaboration. And I, just the other day, I kept reading these things about despectorization that All Things Must Pass. And I just thought, okay, I've had enough. I'm gonna say, so I did this, 21 tweet thread on Twitter talking about, what we're talking about when we talk about the production of this album. So there are 3 phases. There's the tracking sessions, there are the overdubs. First part of that is George and his slide guitar and the vocals, and then the last part of that is the orchestral part, and then you have the mixing. So all 3 of these play a part in fashioning the sound of this record. Spector was in the studio working in the control room, working like he worked at Gold Star in Los Angeles, where he would fill the studio with musicians. He would have 2 or 3 pianos. He would have several guitars. He would not have 2 drums and 2 basses on a track. Alan White and Klaus Voormann both told me they didn't play with anybody else at the same time. But he would stack these instruments and he would create a dense arrangement by doing this. And because they were working on 8-track tape, you have 12 people in the studio and you're leaving maybe a couple of those tracks open for vocals. You're going to be limited to 5 or 6 tracks. So you have to double up tracks. If you have several instruments on a track, you're not going to demix that. That's the sound of the recording. The only thing you can do is EQ. You can bring things down in the mix. You can bring them up in the mix. You can add overdubs to it. You can put reverb on it. You can put echo, all sorts of different effects, but you're not going to demix those individual tracks that might have several instruments. So when people talk about de-spectorizing this album. I think some of what they're talking about is taking out the reverb, but George and Ken were really sort of signing off on that. Ken Scott said, he was the one. He and George were really sort of making the final decision. Spector would come in and make suggestions, and they would take some and reject others. And I think he certainly had an impact. I don't think his style of recording basic tracks. I think that was sort of built into how things were going to turn out eventually. But you have Art of Dying and you have Wah Wah, which a lot of people may think have too much reverb, but then you also have My Sweet Lord and you have Isn't It a Pity? So, where do we land on this? Is it all bad, or is it, are you going to pick and choose? Like, if you're going to say Spector had his fingers in all of this and influenced all of this, and this determines the sound of the record, then, how do you parse that out? I mean, I think those original mixes are exciting. Maybe Art of Dying does have a little bit too much reverb on it, but I think at the time that's what George wanted. And we also have to think of context, because Bridge Over Troubled Water, the climax of that song has a tremendous amount of reverb on it, as does The Boxer. So it's not like this is an anomaly in 1970.
It's in vogue. Yeah.
So it's not strictly what Spector wants. There's a whole world of music going on out there.
Was it only later, you think, that George started to kind of regret it and say that he kind of wanted to get some of that wall of sound, if you will, off, not so much at the time, but in later years? Because it seemed like he was making comments that he would have liked to try to.
Well, yeah, when he went back 30 years later, I think he thought, well, maybe I want to remix some of this. But obviously at the time he signed off on it like that. Mm-hmm. If he and Ken Scott are mixing these things and making the final decision because Spector is becoming less and less reliable, then he had to like it at the time. He had to think this is going to work. And it also plays into this sort of like, I'm making a massive statement.
Yeah, sure. There's also a pretty well subscribed to theory and textual studies about, and it's come up a couple of times in thinking about Phil Spector in these recordings. There may be a clamor to despectorize, and is that like having a tattoo removed, or is it
right?
That's for a different tweet storm, but anyway, there's this school of thought that whether the text is a play or a novel, or in this case an album, the way that the public first receives and validates that text is what's important. And the world pretty sizably held up All Things Must Pass on its shoulders and said, you are number one. This is the text. The same argument could be made for a song that same year that had a lot of stress and debate about it, Long and Winding Road, right? McCartney obviously has espoused having issues with that song over the years, but that thing was number one. And for a lot of people, it was the right soundtrack for the end of the Beatles. That kind of downbeat wistfulness, that sort of note. So, we have to remember that in that moment, the world held up All Things Must Pass and said, "You're the one."
Thank you for saying that, Ken, because I've been defending Phil Spector for quite a while. And I do believe that even though I've said time and time again, the song matters more than the production on All Things Must Pass is part of the reason, a very good part of the reason why it was the success that it was.
Yes.
I really think that it was a masterpiece. It was one of the last great statements that Phil Spector made as a producer. And same thing with The Long and Winding Road. I don't think the song would have been nearly as big if it didn't have, that orchestral arrangement to it. To some people it was overdone, but hey, public spoke. It was number one, and they loved it the way that it was. And sometimes there's too much of an emphasis on how people feel today and not giving the respect of what made it a success in the first place.
Right.
So
I
I
think
also-
they could have gone on a 45 doing Rodney Dangerfield impersonations, and it still would have gone #1 at that point in time.
Oh, that's not true.
Well, no,
That is-
I
I
agree
kid, I
wholeheartedly about the
kid.
Long and Winding Road. I agree wholeheartedly with. I mean, I always loved it with the string range, and what Spector did. I'm a fan of the Let It Be album as it was originally, done by Spector.
Yeah, but there were several singles the Beatles had in
Oh,
America
that
that
didn't go
didn't hit
#1.
#1.
Yep, that's
I mean,
right.
Lady Madonna didn't hit #1 here.
Yeah.
Ballad of John and Yoko didn't hit #1 here. You shouldn't just assume that anything
Yeah.
the Beatles did would go to #1
Yeah,
because it
of
didn't.
course.
Could I just ask a few questions about My Sweet Lord? Because we've all read that the background vocals were the George O'Hara singers, and I've always been told that was George and only George, and layers of George.
Right.
And I even emailed Ken Scott about this, and he said, "You're absolutely right. It's all George." But yet, doesn't it say the names of two women? I keep forgetting their names. Cyril, I think.
Betty and Cyril.
Yeah. Is there
Well,
anybody else that was involved with the backing vocals? Or?
He mentions that in the notes for the 30th anniversary edition, but he doesn't say what songs they performed on. So, and I don't have any other detail about who they were, what that means, anything. So who knows who that's referring to. But yeah, Ken Scott said that was all George, and we talk about the process for doing that in the book. And Chris Thomas said he brought over the Moog to record, overdub something at Trident, and he heard that and he said, "Wow, who's that?" And George says, "That's all me." So, to me on My Sweet Lord, that's pretty clear to have two people who were there say, that's what it was.
Excellent. Imagine all the work that was poured into that for the backing vocals. I would have loved to witness that, George working on that.
Intense.
Yeah. Also, can you verify? I mean, we're uncertain about certain things, but all my life I thought My Sweet Lord had Ringo on drums. And I just saw a video with Bobby Whitlock saying it's Ringo, and I've interviewed Alan White, and he says he's the drummer. So wouldn't you believe the actual drummer?
It's actually neither. It's Andy White.
What does Ringo
Very
say?
good.
It's Bernard Purdy.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that. Bernard Purdy.
Andy Nichols. No,
Alan White told me that he was on drums. This is somebody who wasn't there, but who knows Ringo's drumming really well. A journalist I talked to recently had spoken to Jim Keltner, and Jim Keltner said, "I know Ringo's drumming anywhere. That sounds like Ringo on My Sweet Lord." So for the book, I went with what Alan White told me, because he had a very specific, vivid memory of saying, "I don't think I should be on the song. I think it should be Ringo." And George saying, "No, I want you on the song." And then as he's playing, he can see Ringo, to the left of him playing tambourine.
Right.
So, Ringo apparently just doesn't have a very good memory of any of these sessions. So, asking him isn't necessarily going to solve this issue. And people tend to remember what they played better than what was going on in the room around them. So yeah, it's tough to say, like, okay, well, let's get a consensus of opinion here on who played drums on this track. Let's ask everybody.
Yeah, it's not very very well chronicled, is it? Right?
Yeah.
Who played what on?
So odd with as many musicians that were on there that they didn't bother, maybe because there was too many people.
Well, no, that's what it was. I interviewed John Leckie, who was second engineer, who would have been responsible for writing all that down. There was just too much. You can't keep up with it.
Okay. Joe, do you have a question?
Oh, do I have a question? Oh no, not at the moment.
Is it possible that somebody somebody would admit to playing on a song, but then it was mixed low, and then somebody else may have, replaced that particular, part? Yeah,
Sure,
overdubbed it.
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, I don't know how much. I mean, with the Beatles, a lot of that stuff was much better documented. Like, this was kind of a free for all in some sense,
Right.
and that, you know, a lot of things were happening and maybe not all of it was written down. Definitely not all of it was written down.
Right.
So yeah, certainly, you know, somebody might have recorded the part. And then, I mean, one good example that I can verify is Chris Thomas played Moog on Isn't It a Pity version 1. And he has, you know, told me stories about that session, and it's notated in the I think it's in the Uber box. It talks about how that part is then overdubbed over, like something is recorded on top of that.
Okay.
So Chris played that, and he has a vivid memory of the session and who was there, and you know, his reaction to what was happening in the control room afterward. But we don't hear the part because it was erased. You know,
Right.
they decided they wanted something else.
So somebody claiming that they played just about every track on there could have been overdubbed at some point afterwards.
Possibly. Yeah.
And how much was Bobby Whitlock there? You know, I wonder.
Well, I mean,
That's the top. A couple of people asked questions. I noticed the first question was about Bobby Whitlock, actually.
Well, he and Clapton were available from the very beginning. I have that in that list in the book. The question is, for me, is that week and a half leading up to their gig at the Lyceum on the 14th. Clapton has a session that he's producing on June 10th for PP Arnold. He ostensibly is going to produce an album for her, which never materializes. But on that day, he and Bobby Whitlock are working at that session, while George is in Abbey Road recording the song "All Things Must Pass." So maybe they finished with that and went over later and they played on it, or they overdubbed something the next day. You know, they might be on backing vocals on that. But that's also the date where Jim Gordon is supposed to have shown up, and Carl doesn't show up because he gets lost on the way from the airport. So this is June 10th, that would rule them out for earlier sessions. I think Jim Gordon, I think they were there maybe a few days earlier than that, based on various evidence that I've found since then. So it's unclear, but it doesn't seem like they were there from the very beginning. It seems like they sort of trickled in. But Bobby and Eric were definitely there from the start. Whether they were there on every session, it's unclear. But I think they were on a lot of sessions.
I've watched a number of Bobby's videos, and I'm pretty sure he said that the songs that Pete Drake was on, I think he didn't play on. And Peter Frampton, I think, played acoustic guitar.
Right.
For the songs that Pete Drake played on. So that would be Behind That Locked Door and I Live For You, I guess. Yeah. I'm guessing. Right.
Right. And I mean, he's there for a week, and that's that week just before the Lyceum date.
Which
so
becomes this kind of bookend. Yeah.
Right. So and that, again, that June 10th is right in the middle of that. So I also don't hear any part for Eric on those acoustic sessions. I mean, we talk about that's sort of a separate little island within the All Things Must Pass sessions, where you have these big productions at the beginning, Wah Wah and My Sweet Lord and Isn't It a Pity, and then he sort of, you know, quiets down, and he has I Live For You, and he has If Not For You and Behind That Locked Door, and
Apple Scruffs.
Yeah, well, Apple Scruffs is later. But he has these, you know, these sort of acoustic things, and they clearly seem built for Pete Drake. I think he's planned this out. He's planned that he wants this sound, and but I don't hear a role for Eric Clapton. There's no lead guitar. I mean, he conceivably could have been just strumming acoustic guitar, but why would you do that? You know.
Right.
So, you know, that's a question mark. I can't answer that definitively, but to me it sort of makes sense that he wouldn't be there.
Joe, any more couple more viewer questions?
Mark was asking, doesn't Pete Drake play on the title track?
Yes he does. He overdubbed his part.
And now when it says Beatle had asked what was the last song they played on, but that's a question, was a question before this, so I'm not sure who in particular he's referring to. who they might be. I've been keeping these pretty up to the moment, these questions.
Okay.
So there's nothing
Okay.
really in the back.
Okay, just wanted to make sure we weren't missing any.
I'll go
Okay.
back and look. You know.
Okay. All right. Well, while you're doing that, one thing we wanted to be sure to touch on, because the way our schedule has been going, we weren't able to, really address it, is recently the 50th anniversary of the concert for Bangladesh occurred, and because it's not really the focus of your book, you didn't go into it too much, but I definitely wanted to touch on it, and we actually just discussed it a little bit. I think it was really showed their friendship, the strength of their friendship, that George is at the peak of his powers at this point, organizing this. Thank you, Tom.
He's always ready.
Yep, always ready to go. Just what organized what became this historic concert that would inspire so many after it. And at this point, of course, Eric is struggling with drugs, with alcohol, and you can describe a little bit what happened when George invited Eric to play at Bangladesh.
I'll let Ken take that one. I've been talking too much.
Well, all right.
As we said, he was an absolute wreck, and really, it was deep coaxing from the Harrisons to get him on that stage, and it really begins this extensive period where Eric, disappears into himself for years. Really, until he comes out of it. And perhaps he was doing the soul searching or the drug abuse that had come about from Low those many years. But it's the sad underbelly of Bangladesh, to my ears at least. But what a triumph, I had occasion recently to watch a really pristine version of that footage, and it's just marvelous. What a period George is having in that first sweep of post Beatledom. It's a rousing story.
Really is, and that the band, and his George's voice was just at peak form. I mean,
right, and by his own admission, he'd really learned how to sing. He wasn't comfortable with his vocals in previous years as he was in 1969 and 1970. His ability to be expressive was head over heels, heads and shoulders rather above where he was earlier.
I mean, not only that, I would imagine it would be tough alone just trying to get Clapton there, but then now he's also trying to persuade Dylan to get up on stage.
Yeah. Just made it, right?
As well. Even when he's backstage, he's still trying to coax Dylan to get out there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That question before Beatle Ed was Eric and George. What was the last song they played on? I don't know if you mean it all ever. Just anybody know?
Yeah, I don't know what the last song was. Was he on Ken,
Live in Japan?
I don't know. I wish I feel unprepared now. I feel some research coming on. Yeah.
Next book
in the studio.
Studio wise, it would have been Cloud 9.
Yeah,
the songs from Cloud 9, Devil's Radio.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Maybe
That's what it takes.
Yeah.
He's on there.
Yes, I don't think he's on Brainwashed.
No, he's not. No.
Well, there you go.
So it's got to be.
And George played on Journeyman, Eric Clapton's album, for Run So Far.
Oh, yeah.
But that was the same year. Wait a minute, no.
No, Journeyman
was 89.
89.
So that was after Cloud 9.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh.
See, this kind of analysis is what makes the Talk More Talk colleagues really sing. You know, I hope
This is-
people
Don't-
watch that as
You gotta, you gotta talk it out. Memories come back. You know.
That's right.
But
This is
don't
where we
encourage
get
any
to
of
work.
us to sing, though.
Right.
Really
No,
sing.
just don't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
Yeah.
need to. I need to ask you guys, can you verify whether or not John Lennon was present at all during the All Things Must Pass sessions? Because there have been rumors. When I asked Alan White, he said no.
John Lennon was not in the country during the tracking sessions for All Things Must Pass.
Okay.
He was in Los Angeles undergoing primal therapy. He returned sometime in September, by which point George was mixing. And Bobby Whitlock has a memory of seeing John at the sessions, and I think that he's probably referring to sometime early October when George and John would have been at Abbey Road, because John was working on Plastic Ono Band, and Derek and the Dominoes would have had a break in touring. That's the only time all three of those people could have been in the same room in that year. And so if that's true, and I have no reason to doubt Bobby Whitlock's memory about this, because you would remember meeting John Lennon, I think my gut tells me that they were probably listening to mixes of the album, and that's where John, would have responded positively and had us, probably been surprised that it turned out this well. I can't say one way or the other, but that to me is where John Lennon would have been able to be present during this process.
Okay.
Yep.
I do want to bring up one thing which I found really interesting, that George was present for 7 sessions of Phil Spector working on Let It Be, which I had heard before.
Yeah.
And also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
And we had heard that Paul was wrapping up his album, McCartney, at the same time at Abbey Road Studios in a different studio.
Right.
So it's really interesting that George was there with Phil Spector. I just find it fascinating that they were in the same room listening to the Let It Be stuff together.
Yeah. You kind of wonder, like, were they aware of each other? Was it just this sort of like don't ask, don't tell situation? What was going on there?
I like several of you, I spent time there, and I find it hard to believe that you're not taking a smoke break or a coffee break or running down to the canteen or the bathroom or what have you. It's not that big a place.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, we have a question here also, if I may. Harry G. Benson asking, was any member of Badfinger involved with the recording, or was it just the concert for Bangladesh?
Oh no, they were there.
You were there, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they had to leave on tour. One source I saw said the 4th of June. I believe they were maybe there a couple of more days. They had to be in Honolulu on the 8th. So however long it took them to get there, they had to leave before that date, because they were performing at a Capitol Record Convention event. But for those first sessions, they were definitely there.
Yeah, they're credited as rhythm guitars and percussion.
Right. So that's them strumming on My Sweet Lord, along with George.
And that was a fascinating story you told about that. I don't want to say too much about it because you've got to read. I know we've said over and over, you got to read the book.
Read the book.
But there's a fascinating story in it about how much work it took to record that song, and the guitar is part of that. Just one of many fascinating stories in book. This was just such perfect timing that this book came out when it did, because when you listen to the 50th anniversary set, no matter which version you got, and you read this and you learn about the making of it, I mean, you really listen to the album in a different way. Certainly that's the case with me. I mean, you really appreciate more just the sheer amount of work it took to make this album. The time and again, just what an important statement this was for George to make. the huge risk he was taking
Yeah.
this album. So it's just an incredible book.
Thank you.
Really
Thank you.
enjoyed it.
Yeah. Did
Really.
you guys butt heads on anything? Do you guys pretty much get along during the whole process?
Oh, this should be good.
I'd like to have a book about that.
Yeah.
No, I think we had some different vision that seeing where each other was going helped us to kind of head off different things that might have occurred at the past. I think I don't know, it might have sprawled in other sorts of directions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. A couple of death threats. I mean, really, just nothing worth talking about.
We were fortunate to be indoors in this tough time, and
Yes,
yes.
like
I
I
mean,
said,
in
I was,
reality,
Yeah.
this book should have been an afterthought to the release of the All Things Must Pass box set.
right. The timing was just, it happened to work out this way.
Our Let It Be book is going to be out 2 weeks from now.
When
Or
is your Revolver book
2023
coming out? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, as soon as we find a way to break down the multi-tracks so that we can mix it. I'm sorry, that's not me, that's Giles. Sorry. I get us confused all the time.
Nice.
Oh man.
Would you be able to give us your opinion as to why, for something like this, they don't rely on the past engineers that worked on the album, Ken Scott and Phil McDonald? Or do you think it's just a case of we need fresh ears now? This is for the new generation who are discovering this, possibly what their thinking might be?
I wish, that's such a great question. And I've heard from some of the folks from the past who wonder, really prominent folks who wonder, are they being excluded? What's the thinking there? And I haven't heard an adequate argument necessarily.
Yeah, it's really strange. I mean, even the picture of from above in the White Album sessions, where it's George and the Beatles and Chris Thomas is off to there to the left in the uncropped picture. They crop Chris Thomas out of the picture in the book.
Wow.
That doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why he was an important part of making that album.
Right.
Of course.
He's probably
So
the
I
only
don't-
one who remembers it.
Right. Yeah, he has great memories of it too. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, it seems to be their rule that they don't do new interviews for these projects. Yeah.
Oh,
Which leaves it to us to do the interviews, which is fine. I'm happy
there
to
you go.
call Klaus and talk to him about this.
Yeah,
Are these
Klaus gave
people
some
wi-
great
yeah, are-
interviews.
Yeah. I mean,
About
have
the
these
book.
guys been willing to talk to you about that? I mean, talk about some of the people that you guys interviewed for the book.
I mean, yeah. I mean, some people we didn't hear back from. I had wished I could talk to Dave Mason about working with
Oh,
Derek
yeah.
and the Dominoes, but
Right.
didn't hear back from him. Didn't hear back from Gary Wright. But Klaus was very generous with his time. Alan White, John Leckie, who was the second engineer. On the
Ironically, I am talking to Dave Mason this week.
sessions. Really?
I'm not making this up.
Well,
But
ask him about the album.
Right.
I will. In fact,
Recall on the books. We got to get Dave Mason's.
Well-
Get him back. I'll send you a page to sort of tip in. You can.
Right.
for a moment, we were getting a really great response from Phil Spector via email, and but he was very, very much less interested in answering questions about All Things Must Pass and more interested in talking about, sort of reconsidering his recent legal case, which wasn't,
Sure.
as you know, the subject of this book.
No, nope, afraid not.
Also, if you talk to Dave Mason, you could ask him about a track he did called Save Me from 1980 that Michael Jackson sang backup on.
Well,
Wow.
that's the reason we're talking.
Yeah, I figured that might be it.
Yeah.
I mention it. Yeah, I mentioned that in my
Peter
book.
Hicks says, add Mason to the paperback edition,
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
revised edition.
That'll
Yeah,
be,
we
second
good,
edition.
very good point, Peter. And yeah, we sort of have a list of things we're gonna attack there. Maybe it could be this new Dave Mason, but that'll be for the paperback edition of Kit's book. So
That's right. But that'll
right.
be the second edition. Yeah.
that's right.
No, I can't stop researching. So someone needs to come and pull me aside and put me in a closet or something, because I just keep finding
It was
stuff.
like what Lennon said about Harrison and Spector. One was continuing to add,
Yes.
instruments. It was adding
Yes.
production.
Yes, if someone can
Yep.
come by with a tranquilizer gun and shoot me, that'd be great.
Plus, you could use to sleep. I mean,
Absolutely, yes.
There you go. Oh boy. Well, we probably should be wrapping this up. I mean, I can't believe how fast the time has flown here, but I mean, we could go on and on talking about this, but really, this is such a great book. For once, I have it to show and tell here as
Can you look at
well.
Let's all hold it up.
Yeah.
Mine's in the other room,
No,
They have it.
no. But yeah, all things must pass away. Harrison Clapton and other assorted. Hold up that
Yeah,
gnome, Ken. Come on.
Kit needs that. Kit needs it.
Oh, I want
here's
that
the big
gnome.
boy.
There you go.
Oh, my favorite.
Oh,
I got one last
George.
question
Rub
for
it in.
Womack there. Is he going
yeah.
for this hairstyle there, and will the mustache follow?
I don't know what you mean, Tom.
Oh my goodness. So Jason and Ken, thank you so much for joining us again. It was an absolute pleasure, and we loved talking to you all about this book. And of course, anytime you want to come back, you are always welcome here. We love having you here.
Yes.
Thank you.
And oh, absolutely. And since you are our guest, why don't you start, Jason? What do you have coming up that you'd like us to know about besides this book?
Well, there's always Producing the Beatles, which it's a podcast, obviously, and you can find that everywhere podcasts are found. You can also go to the website, producingthebeatles.com. And to answer everyone's most favorite question, I am working on new episodes. Season 2 is coming, I promise.
Hey.
2 bonus episodes.
Before volume 2 of Tune In, right?
Yes, before volume 2. That's a pretty safe bet for everything. And I'll be doing an episode on My Sweet Lord and the making of My Sweet Lord, and an episode on Isn't It a Pity. I had a composer in the UK recreate the scores for both songs from John Barb's manuscripts, which are in the end papers of the book. So
right.
I'll be able to play isolated scores of both those songs, in addition to the other tracks and George's isolated vocals, and sort of the regular thing I do. So
Wow.
keep an ay out for that.
And those, a quick word on those isolations. I've been fortunate to hear them, and we're using them in our presentations we're gearing up for this fall. They're just beautiful. They really add layers of bliss to our understanding of this record. Some of them are still in heavy rotation on my playlist, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's
You kind of wish they'd been included in the box set.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, wouldn't that have been nice?
One part of Isn't It a Pity, one section may not have even been recorded. John Barham couldn't remember, but he thinks either it wasn't recorded or it's mixed solo. You can't hear it. So you'll be able to hear that now in the isolations. Yeah.
Cool.
So something to look forward to.
Well, definitely looking forward to that. Thanks, Jason. All right, Ken W., how about you?
I'm keeping busy. I'm doing my own Everything Fab Four podcast for salon.com. And I've been doing a Fab Four masterclass with all of our mutual friend, Scott Fryman. So we've been having a lot of fun with that all throughout the pandemic. I've been offering record clubs here at Monmouth University and the like. And it's really been great, a great experience to be involved in this wonderful community of listeners. We all are really privileged to know and share experiences with not just about Beatles things, but about, loving music and the arts. It's, for all of our challenges during this period, it's been really gratifying.
That's for sure. Where can people find you if they want to contact you?
Oh, they can find me at kennethwomack.com.
All right.
I'm there in some fashion.
All right. And Jason, how about you? Do you have a website?
Just producingthebeatles.com. That's the best way to find me. And you can follow me on Twitter at PTBeatles.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Ken. And for us, you can follow us at talkmoretalk.com, on Twitter at talkmoretalk1, the number 1. You can also email us at talkmoresolotalk@gmail.com. You, of course, can find us on YouTube, and please subscribe. Getting more and more subscribers as time goes on. We're over 1,000. We're excited. So let's keep this going. Keep this train moving. So please subscribe. You of course can find us on virtually any podcasting platform you can think of. Subscribe there as well. And you can find us on Facebook. And we also want to give a big shout out to Beatle Ed, who runs our show on fab4radio.com. So big thumbs up to him. He runs a lot of our shows, in fact, so our individual shows. So thank you so much. And we will be back August 23rd with, of course, our take on the All Things Must Pass box set. So that'll be a great show. I have a feeling we're going to have a lot to say.
More and more all the time.
Yeah,
I think that's a fair bet.
Is there going, Kid? Is there going to be a separate show on Bobby Whitlock? Is that how?
that may have to happen. There's a lot to say there as well.
One never knows.
One never knows.
Well, as long as we don't have to pay him.
As long as we have to pay him, that's right. There you go. And as for me, the only thing I'll just mention is coming up next month, I have my class I'm teaching on Philly Soul through Monmouth University's adult ed program. You still have time to sign up. I'll have the link after the show. I'll put it up. I have it on my page. I'll have it on our Talk More Talk page. If you love the OJs, the stylistics, the 3 degrees, this is the class for you.
It sure is. And I can tell everybody that Kid O'Toole is rapidly becoming the queen of adult rock music education. QRM. Yeah, QRME.
Okay.
Gourmet.
Oh, gourmet. All right.
Why are we laughing? That's actually a good thing.
Well, thank you.
It's laughing through joy.
That's right. That's right.
Oh, because every week we find something else that she's the queen of.
I'm the queen of. Yeah, that's why we're laughing. Yeah. No, I know it's a compliment, but yeah, there's what is it? Yeah, Beatles media, lipstick. I forget what else we're doing now.
There's
a lot of backgrounds. So it's adding up.
Yeah.
So
well, since you're queen of lipstick, I'm gonna let that one go.
Okay.
I had some aspirations, but no.
Yeah. Sorry, it's taken. So
it's fine.
All right. So Tom, how about you? What are you up to?
Thank you. Well, in the two legs world, we are taking August off. We just decided that we had a lot going on in our personal lives, and actually, Andy's coming out here in a couple weeks, and we're going to hang out and with as well as our good pal Ethan Alexanian. We're just going to have a crazy time and have a lot of fun. But about a week and a half ago, we posted our last new episode, and we revisited the Live at the Cavern Club DVD set. So we had a lot of fun talking about that whole period in time. And so you can find us on our YouTube, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast. We just passed 700 subscribers, so thank you everybody for subbing and checking us out. We love hearing from you guys, and we got a lot of new series planned for the future, live shows. We'll probably live on Wednesday to give our thoughts on the McCartney 3 Imagined album, and like I said, a lot of things coming up in the future. So once again, thank you everybody for checking us out. Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Two Legs Podcast, and hopefully we'll see you there.
All right. Always busy. Always keeping busy. All right. Okay, Joe, how about you? What are you up to?
Well, I'm doing a lot of stuff about the All Things Must Pass remix that just came out on my channel on YouTube, Mean Mr. Mayo, if you want to subscribe. I was just on the Sam Wiles podcast, Paul or Nothing, where I participated in his ongoing series, Macca in Your Attic, where you show some interesting McCartney memorabilia. And I should be doing another Fab Gab show live, possibly this coming Sunday in a week or so. And it's going to be All Things Must Pass songs ranked from least favorite to most favorite
Wow.
with my partner on the show, Matthew Street. So check
Does that
out
include
Fab
the
Gab.
Apple
It's on.
Jam?
Yeah, I think, yeah.
No, we're not including the Apple Jam, actually.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So I was gonna
So-
say that's
Well,
tough.
then
Just,
no,
just the regular songs.
no thanks for the pepperoni then.
No. Thanks for the heartburn.
Yeah.
No remembering to keep.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, and last but definitely not least, Ken, how about you? What are you up to?
First of all, my website, kenmichaelsradio.com. As you know, every week there's Beatles trivia that's posted. I have 4 new prizes in the last few weeks to give
Wow.
away. You have a choice of 1 of 10, and one of them happens to be the book that we've been talking about. I just got a winner, by the way.
Apparently, you can give it away.
Mhm.
I can. And we had a winner from Florida who guessed
Oh.
last week's Beatles trivia. I'm also giving away a new book called Beatles 100, 100 Pivotal Moments in Beatle History from John Borak.
Oh yeah.
Also, McCartney 3 Imagined I'm giving away, and the new Ramon tribute. So that's at kenmichaelsradio.com. The trivia runs from Monday through Sunday. And I get, I have one winner every single week, and they pick one of those 10 prizes that are on that page, my Beatles Trivia and Games page. Also, oh, I see the gnome right next to you. I thought you're holding it up there, kid.
Oh, I wish. I wish.
Okay.
No gnomes for kids.
No gnomes for Kit. No.
Oh, I wish I had a gnome. Anyway, the young podcaster, Hudson Ranny, I was on 2 of his podcasts, one of which is called I Know, and together we interviewed Youth, the producer, and we talked about his work with McCartney on the Fireman albums. Check that out at I Know. That's the name of his podcast. He also started a brand new one called P2 Podcast Blues. That's a solo Harrison podcast. And I got the gang from Things We Said Today to be on that podcast, along with Hudson and Martin Quibble, who is his co-host. And we talked about George's Gone Troppo album. So check that out at P2 Podcast Blues. Also, my own YouTube channel, Ken Michaels Radio. I just interviewed Joe's co-host, Matthew Street. And we did a Fab 5 show together where
I just watched it.
Yeah,
Oh.
great episode. I watched it too.
Very interesting choices. That's all I'll say.
Oh, definitely. Ringo's choice surprised me. And Paul, the choice for Paul was surprising.
Hmm.
That's when I asked my guests to pick 5 albums, 1 Beatles, 1 from each solo Beatle, that are your go-to albums for today that you're listening to, for whatever the reason, and explain why. And then there's Things We Said Today. We just did a show reviewing just the audio from All Things Must Pass, the box set. And then our next show, which happens to be on the 23rd, we'll be interviewing these 2 fine gentlemen, Ken Womack and Jason Kruppa. And we'll be talking about the book, so there'll be plenty more questions, and I'll be doing that on my YouTube channel as well. I just hope they don't get sick of me.
Well, and actually, Ken, to make sure they don't get sick of us, Jason and I are going to do the opposite answers for everything.
Okay, good.
So that's going to take a little rhetorical, gymnastics from us, but we're going to be ready for it. So the opposite will be in vogue.
Well,
I'll be-
Ken, you
I'll
said
be-
something interesting about you guys are just going to review the audio, but I forgot to ask Jason or Ken, do you know if anything was filmed during the All Things Must Pass sessions by
I was going to
chance?
ask that.
No.
Okay.
The only
Yeah.
pictures that were taken during the tracking sessions were by Pete Drake.
Okay.
He brought his camera, so that's where all these pictures are coming from. You see in the books.
Okay. Thanks.
So that's what's going on with me.
All right. All keeping busy. Okay. Well, thank you again, Jason and Ken. Be sure to pick up this book if you can see it. There we go. All things must pass away. Thank you guys again for being on the show. And thank you all for joining us tonight. We will be back in a couple of weeks. And until then, for Tom, Jason, Ken, and Joe, this is Kit saying, let it roll. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Oh,
Die.
Sir Frankie Crisp.